Welcome to TechRaptor. We are here today with Frankie and KP of 11 Studios talking about the first season of Death Roll show, Camp Rend. To start this all off, I'd love for you both to have a chance to introduce yourselves.
I am Frankie, Frankie Nix, but I go by Chuck Stamos online. You can find me into that on any socials, which I guess really is only Twitter. So I'm the creator, and I also do the DMing. Also was producer on the show. So kind of wearing all the hats. I think that's what you do from the beginning, just like KP. You go ahead.
Hey, my name is KP. I go by KP11 Studios online on all the socials. I'm a photographer, performer, voice actor, cultural consultant, writer, etc., etc. Too many taglines. And also now, an additional tagline, producer as well on the show. And I want to make a slight correction to what Frankie said earlier. He's not just the producer; he's the executive producer, and we are his fellow producers, helping him bring his vision to life. I'm also one of the players and performers on the show itself, and yeah, we're just very excited to be a part of this. I thank you to Frankie to having me, and then afterwards going, yeah, that's fine, to all my harebrained ideas that came after. So
Not all of them, but yeah, most of them.
For Death Roll show, the idea of a TTRPG anthology series, where did that come from, and what helped you settle on the theme for this first season?
Well, so I have a friend that has a production company here locally to me, and that's who produced this. Who actually produced the first Death Roll, the first series, and he focuses on his company focuses on kind of like that. Kind of B movie horror type, lots of like the kind of old school special effects, like blood and gore and that kind of thing, really campy. And so he, I've been trying to get him to do a project with me, but he's just never been interested really. And he's not, big in TTRPG or D&D or anything like that. I think he's played a couple times in high school, like way back when I drug him along, and he was like, "This is lame, let's go," kind of thing. But so every time I pitch it, he's kind of, and so I end up finally forcing him to watch a Dropout enough to where he got interested, and he really appreciated how Dropout as a company was structured with lots of employee involvement and profit sharing and things like that. And so then I was able to kind of show him Dimension 20, show him how successful those things were, and then so in telling him that, I kind of to get the company to agree to do it, I pitched it. I was like, we could do something horror related, and he's like, oh yeah, but I've always had a love for horror, not as much as him, but growing up and stuff, like Fright Night, and then obviously Friday the 13th and all that stuff. But I was more into like the weird kind of like, if you remember, like Cat's Eye and things like that always had like little stories. It was like 5 little stories, and then kind of made it up. So that's kind of where I got the anthology idea, because also wanted to pitch it in a way smart commercially, because to get him to do it, I was like, look, we can shoot it all in one day. We can shoot 4 episodes. He's used to getting pitches that are multiple locations, bringing actors in on different weekends. And I was like, we can just do it all in one weekend. It's all done. So that's also appealing to a production company. It's a lot less for them to really take a risk on. So, and then we just rolled the dice and started asking people, literally. I just started going on Twitter DM, like in the TTRPG space, and messaging people I happily knew by been playing online for a while, in the charity circuit especially.
So what is the premise for this first season for Camp Rend? What type of horror can fans expect?
Bloody, I would say. Bloody. Lots of blood. As evident in our now 2 trailers, one uncensored, and we had to make a censored one because YouTube ads were like, no, this is not advertiser friendly. And we're like, what? Okay, fine, here you go. So
it's your typical, I will say, kind of harken back to the first one. The reason we chose this genre specific, like slasher films, was because obviously a love for everything, being a 80s kid, a millennial, but also I knew that being on a short budget, we might have some mishaps in production, and I can throw like a VHS filter on everything and make it kind of match if I need to. I mean, that's just me being honest, and we've had that come up a couple of times where it's nice to be able to kind of throw that fuzzy filter on there to hide some of your gas in production, because you just didn't, have the money to have 6 PAs on hand and, dedicated camera operators instead of, our camera operator Danny going from like one to the other, making sure everything's the same. So, yeah, so I knew that it would, in that sense, be easier to edit in editing bay and then get through and cover up some of the mistakes.
I know that the first season isn't out yet, but are there already thoughts stirring as to, what would be next in the anthology?
I can answer that question, where we are already, despite just to kind of give the timeline of everything. I think Frankie told me that he started writing for this first series maybe 6-7 months ago at this point, maybe 8 at the most. And that's when the idea started percolating. I found out about the show back maybe in May, and I got asked to be on board to be a cast member on it. And then shooting happened end of August. And then now we're aiming for October for release of the first season, right? So really, really tight schedule to get everything together, even if it's just 4 episodes. There's so much going on. And what I'm glad about the team is we're already look very positive and looking towards the horizon on what we want to do. We have ideas for a sci-fi themed one. We have ideas for very cult-like / witchy vibed ones in the future, almost Blair Witch Project style-esque. And just and not only just in terms of storyline wise, but also in terms of how can it be manifested on screen in a unique way. Obviously, the big seller for our first show has been the showcasing of battle damage while the show is progressing on our players, right? We also have an additional game mechanic. It's D&D based, but we have incorporated mechanics from other systems. And I think the biggest one you can see in our trailer is using the Jenga tower from Dread, and using that as a system to elevate the stress, elevate the impact of decisions that are being made on screen, to kind of really, because D&D and all of these games, your players typically are very powerful, and it's very easy to lose that sense of risk, that sense of dread. And so we kind of wanted to bring that back into the show and ensure that as players and as characters, we still felt the fear that came from being in a situation where we didn't have control and survivability was not likely. And with that mental thought and process, any show that we're planning to tackle, we wanted to ensure that there's a element in there that really is specific to that type of show we're trying to produce and the type of story we want to produce, and ensuring that it continues to elevate that fear factor. But I think we have a list at this point of at least 3 to 4 different shows, ideas that we want to do. We're very ambitious, and I think what we're bringing to the TTRPG space and the storytelling space is unique enough. I mean, there's going to be similarities between shows, but I think we're bringing something very unique that gives audiences a new experience in the TTRPG community.
I did notice the Jenga tower and the description about how you were implementing that from Dread. Will that be like a full takeover, or is that going to be, speaking of things like Dropout, will that kind of be your box of doom?
What I think a lot of people is hard and horror themed, like even in Curse of Strahd, the module I've done, for 5e, it's hard to have those stakes. As Matt Mercer says, it's hard to have those real stakes with someone just getting rezzed and keeps getting rezzed, right? So I think that was one of the things that I was trying to find a way to increase that. And I tried a couple different things first. I tried in some test games borrowing the system from Kids on Bikes, university tokens, and I tried like an anti-adversity system. I workshopped kind of one of those programs where you try to stop it, like the little bar that stops, and I just kept coming back to the tower. Yeah, I kept coming back to the tower, and just it's just too, it's perfect in a way, because, there's a little bit of skill involved, and I will this is a first time ever, but there is a rule that I instate, which is when we do the tower pulls, which is you touch it, you take. So no tippy tappies. You can't just go around and try to find a loose one. If you touch the block, you take that block, no take back. So, that kind of added another.
Yeah, immediately the tension is so much higher if you don't even have the confidence to know that this will wiggle. Oh my God.
The thing about the tower is that, without getting into any spoilers, the consequences are real. If that tower falls, there's some serious consequences that no mechanic in D&D will be able to help you with. And so I think because of that, you're like, oh crap, I really need to make sure that this damn tower doesn't fall. And what sucks about it, obviously, by the nature of that mechanic, as more blocks get pulled, it becomes more and more precarious. And so the consequences are becoming more and more likely to happen. So as the show progresses, the stakes continue to build, which I loved about the premise of the show, because naturally you're like, oh shit, maybe the first episode, you're like, oh, something's going down. Oh crap. But then as it progresses, you're like, oh no. You will see in the trailer, there's one moment at the very end where I am just yipping and jumping for joy. Let me tell you, that moment
was real.
The level of stress I was feeling and the relief of actually accomplishing that tower pull.
When that moment happened, I was like, I'll be in my head. I was just like, okay, we might have something here. Like that, like that was like the proof, almost like the validation of proof of concept. Because I wanted to find a way to turn up the tension, but also, like KP said, as the stakes get higher, that it's going to be harder for the next pull. I didn't have a set thing for blocks either, and you'll find that in the game too. I'm very rules loose, and I know I'll probably get stuff on the internet, and I'm gonna get hit by tons of comment people that are like, actually,
you could be 100% rules accurate, and the internet would still get mad at you.
Yeah.
That's
so, but I'm
not
open
worth
about
worrying.
it. Like, I very much, in a way to keep it under, like we wanted to be 45 minutes and under, and a way to keep that moving too. A lot of times I'll just make rulings on the fly. Like just Emily Axford said it the best, and that's how I try to play. Like one of my players to do is she just said she thinks of cool shit she would do in an action movie. So that's kind of like what I want my players to do. So anytime they're like, I want to jump over this and do a flip, I'm like, tower pull. Okay, if I can see that scene in an action movie, you're pulling from the tower type of thing. We had them shaking hands. A couple of people started doing push-ups to keep themselves calm. Like it got really serious in there. Almost to not what I wanted as a DM, because they started working together and doing teamwork, which is not what you want to see as a DM that's trying to be a slasher.
Especially in a slasher, you want them to split
you're
apart
exactly.
and maybe go and have sex off somewhere.
Exactly. They never split up, and I was like, that's not right.
Moments. There were moments.
Yeah.
We know that the Jenga was used to test the stats of the players. But for the stats of the characters, what level are the characters, and were there any unique rules for character creation to make everyone fit better into the kind of horror camp in a semi-fantasy world?
Especially for the first game, I remember Frankie mentioning that we wanted to initially stick to D&D a bit more simply so that any new audience member, when they join us, there's a baseline that they can at least connect with, and not kind of get lost in the sauce. But with that being said, character-wise, it was more so working in Frankie's world that he created. Without divulging too much, it's very much a combination of fantasy and modern settings, similar to Fantasy High. We are D&D characters in a modern world. I know for a fact several characters created new aspect into this world, and that got incorporated into it. So that was super fun in that sense. I think more so than anything, it was just interacting with this kind of world as a D&D, like a fantasy character, and trying to remember we are also in a modern setting. How does that work? How does fantasy and modern work together in this world? And how would my player or my character react to a situation like that? But ultimately, in the end, it is a very focused story about a bunch of, technically younglings, teenagers, whatever that means to different races, coming to camp, hoping for a good experience, and now isolated and threatened by an entity they can't quite understand or fathom. And I think that kind of immediately focuses you in. It becomes a very tight, focused scenario. So all the other frills and whistles kind of go out the window at that point, because you're just like, oh shit, what's happening?
I will say they were mechanically they were level 5, just
yeah.
to start. And then I did have original plans when before we started filming where I was gonna have like this have them level up, but it was tough because I also wanted the scenario to happen in one night, because obviously that's how most horror films happen. It's supposed to be a short series, and then also I felt that was a good way to balance it power wise too, because then their spells are a lot more important. They're never gonna have a long rest, so playing in this, so it's kind of made their actions a little bit more meaningful, because you knew you were gonna like, oh, I'll just take a long rest and get this refurbished or whatever. So yeah, I did end up not leveling them essentially to LDR and just kept them level 5 the whole way through. But I did reward them in other ways with power boost and things like that for certain what I called like just key moments that would have looked cool in an action movie. I was like, you get something awesome for that,
I think this also ties into how the Jenga tower got used as well, because it wasn't just Frankie asking us to use the tower. Sometimes the players themselves were like, I want to do something really cool. And I know that to pull it off, I would need probably a nat 20 or something really high. This is impossible. But once again, it's a cool moment. And then we ask, can we pull from the tower to see if we can do this? And Frankie would be like, you know what? Yeah. If you are able to pull from the tower, I will allow this to happen. And so
I wanted them to pull from the tower. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I would entice them. I remember
faster this goes up, faster it goes down.
Yeah, exactly. And that first episode, I'm trying to get them to pull, so I'm like offering it for everything, right? I'm like, hey, why don't you try doing this? Like to impress this person, you can do like 3 backflips if you pull it. And they're like, no. And I'm like, dang it. Come on.
KP, for you specifically, you play Camp Counselor Viren. Tell me a bit about who they are, how they found themselves working at the camp, and what relationships they might have with the other characters.
Absolutely. So Camp Counselor Viren is a gung-ho type. He is all about the camp. This is probably, I think, his third year working at Camp Rend. He comes from a local druid circle in the nearby forest, and he does not like being a part of it. He hates the idea of being stuck in the past and being all nature-esque. Essentially, everybody's like, oh, druids are all nature and in touch with nature. To him, he's like, no, they're a bunch of flower children and nudists going around and just hugging everybody and doing all sorts of weird things. And you have to understand, maybe as an adult, you're like, oh, that's so super cool coming into a commune like that after you've already experienced the world. To him, he's like, I was born into this. I've seen way too many so-called sticks and shrubs growing up, man. I'm good. And I think the best way I can describe it is that to him, Camp Rend is the what's the term for it that Amish have? When like
Rumspringa.
Yeah, the Rumspringa.
I was just thinking, it's like a druid Rumspringa, like going out and getting out of nature.
Exactly, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to connect to society. He wanted to connect to urbanism and technology, and I think Camp Rend was a great place for him to be able to do so, because then he can come here and have city kids come in and interact with them and understand what's going on in the outside world, right? And so that he's very gung-ho about that. And you kind of that's kind of the vibe I tried to give him. And he can be a little bit of a coward. To him, he's just like, I'm just here as a counselor, man. What the F? Sort of a character. But I think he has his moments, and I love him for that.
A key part of the trailer, and you mentioned before the trailer got demonetized, was the elements of gore and getting wounded. What was the idea of adding such a visceral and physical element to your game?
That I have to give kudos to the person I hear, Colin Fleetwood, the director. That was kind of when he had finally accepted the deal, and like we were talking, like actually getting down production details. It actually came about because he didn't understand the medium completely, so because I was discussing how an actual play works. And at first, when I first told him like we'd need a set, he was like, "Oh, that's going to take all of our budget. We have a set." I was like, "No, and I couldn't think of a way to set it." So we talked to our set designer, and she was like, "Oh, so you mean like it's a play, like Big Boy?" It's like, "Yeah, like a play, like that's all we need behind us," kind of thing. And he was like, "Oh, I was thinking you needed like us to build like a living room or something." No, so that's how much like he thinks movie and TV, like he doesn't have his brain set for AP. So when I was talking to him, like during that conversation, I had mentioned something like, oh, and then like, because I was trying to explain, like, then he'll roll, and if I beat his armor class, I'd come down and I'd hit him, and he's like, okay, well, what happens? Like, do they get damaged? I was like, yeah, he might have like a big gash in his shoulder. He's like, so, and he was like, so we do the makeup for that? And I was like, no, but maybe. And he's like, yeah, like we could do the makeup. I was like, could we could we do that on the fly? Like, I was like, how fast does that happen? He's like, well, I mean, how good does it have to look? I was like, it doesn't have to look great. It can be kind of like, but I'd like it to look decent. And he's like, I don't know, maybe like 5 to 30 minutes, depending on the wound. And I was like, and then like everything just started ticking and we started clicking. And I started thinking, like, I haven't really seen this on an AP yet. I haven't really seen, of course, then like as we're getting to production, I think over summer, Never Stop Blowing Up releases and Brennan gets like worse, but just Brennan gets like worse. I was like, God damn it. No. But yeah, but I don't think I'd seen like specifically battle damage, on AP. And yeah, I was like, that's a really cool idea. And it fits so in line with the horror aspect and the slasher aspect, right? It was a no-brainer, honestly. It was not this. I'd love to take credit for having like this grandiose idea, but it was just like talking to somebody and by accident, a happy accident, we just kind of ran with it, and it turned out really well. So much so that I think when KP first posted online, people were actually worried, like, are you okay? What happened?
Yeah. Being there and seeing it on my body, I was just in awe and how realistic they made it look in such a quick time, right? I mean, being able to produce 4 episodes in a single day while still taking time for makeups and SFX and stuff like that, and all of that went into it. It's just a huge kudos to the talent of the crew that we have had. I mean, it was very much a skeleton crew of people coming together who are just passionate about such a project, but each one brought such skill and such talent into what we did, and I think this production would not have happened if any single one of them were not there. It also is what led me to be like, Frankie, can I be permanently involved? Can I do more?
No,
what can I do more?
I want to go on record that's not true, because when we got done filming everything, KP like messaged me like, hey, are you going to do the socials for Death Roll? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to try. And I'm just not a big social media person. I'm not, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. That's just not one of my strengths. I'm okay with it. But KP offered to do it. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, I knew it was the importance of getting the names. So I'd already gone through and gotten the names to all the accounts, but I literally had posted nothing. Like, not a thing. KP just takes over, hits the ground running. Jess agrees to help, and with them involved, I was just like, when they asked to be a part of it, I was more like, are you sure you want to do? Like, are y'all sure y'all want to be a part of it? It's nice to feel that sense of like, I'm glad they believe in the project enough to want to be a part of it, because it's a no-brainer for me, because I need the help, like especially on that end, and they're amazing. You can see the campaign they've done, the posting, they're hey, let's do this video. They do so many great things with the behind the set photos that I gave to them. I would have just left those in a folder to rot like somewhere in a Google Drive, and they're like making calendars out of them and stuff, so I can't say enough about how just lucky I am to have them involved.
When I was on the show and I got to experience the story, I got to experience the production and all these cool things that we were doing with it, I personally felt at that moment that, hey, no one else is doing something like this. This is pretty cool. I already am imagining how we can take this to the next level and how we can take this further and keep doing this. The moment Frankie was like, this is going to be an anthology series, I was like, great. There's so many things we can then do with that. Like, series 1 is this, series 2 can be sci-fi, series 3 can be this, series 4 can be that. And as someone who came from a project management background from the corporate world, I was like, okay, this is where I can help it. Like, I know I know how to do project management. I know how to help set things up. I'm also, and what is a producer but a project manager for the media world?
For indie creators wanting to work on their own first creation, what kind of first tips might you offer, either from a behind the scenes perspective or from a player perspective, to level up their game?
I'll say this: keep trying, don't give up. I know that sounds lame, but I mean, as far as like, when I first started auditioning, I had a very bad first experience. like it as being like a TTRPG actor, you know, and I just kind of soured me on it, and I almost gave up completely. Like it was just like, well, it was like at that time I said I had found like, you know, Dimension 20. I was like, I want to do this. I want to go online and do this, and I'm gonna audition for this, and then like it just was really sour. So there, you're gonna have bad experience with some bad people. And unfortunately, we all know in this world there are some gatekeepers. There are some, you know, some bad actors in this field. And I think a run in with one of those can really sour you and you know make you just sour on the whole experience. And so I would say just work through that, you know, at your own pace. But if you can get on the other side of it, there are some really amazing people that you know you get to meet and can end up being collaborators with. You know, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, do I think I'd be producing something with KP11 Studios, who like I said, was already a fan of, see headshots all the time. I'm like, oh, he's amazing. He's an amazing photographer. You know, he brings their characters and their essences of themselves in his editing and his photo editing. So, you know, I was already a fan. So if you'd have told me 6 months ago I'd be producing something with him, I'd been like, well, that's not going to happen, you know, like, so this is really just a great experience for me too, you know? And so, yeah, just push through that and then think big. Don't, you know, if you have an idea and you think it's like good, like think big. Don't, you know, don't be like, oh, I'll just do this online, like for my friends, you know, and see if maybe I'll like mention on my Twitter and see if anybody, no, like, dude, like get some artwork done, think big, like go for it. Cause this, I will say in this medium, this world of Dimension 20 and Critical Roles and, you know, even the Legends of Vantress and the other ones out there, you know, it's a medium that's growing and it needs content, you know? So, and there's definitely an echelon of like people who just kind of, you know, I'm not phone it in, you know, or just do it for fun. And then that like well-produced stuff, you know? So if you're hitting, like, if you're going to go big, like try to overproduce it, try to do it well, because yeah, the medium needs it and there people want to watch it. So it's definitely a need there. So yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. On my end, as both a performer and now as someone who's helping produce one, just get started. Just start. I feel like a lot of people, and this goes to any form of creative work, people gatekeep themselves from doing it because they're like, oh, I need this material and this equipment and all of this and all of that. And I'm like, I can give you concrete examples of productions out there that are very low budget, what they are doing and using, but they use it smartly in a way that gives a very dynamic cinematic feel, and you can get away with a lot of things just with a little bit of duct tape and and a little imagination.
VHS filter.
Yeah, no,
yes,
seriously, like
it's 100%.
Exactly, and so don't. If you have ideas, as Frankie said, start it. Just go for it. I like using this quote, and forgive me, you can cut it out if you need to in terms of content-wise, but it comes from this quote comes from a porn director, of all people. And the reason I like it so much is because he specifically says, everybody is fuckable. Everybody out there, no matter how you look, who you are as a person, how you physically look, there's someone else out there that will look at you and go, I want to smash that, right? But to my brain, when I read that, immediately it went to, if you have an idea, there is someone out there that wants to smash that idea. There's someone out there that wants that idea in existence because it scratches some part of their brain, and they're like, this is fantastic. Also, a lot of people tend to be like, oh, I want to make it big. I want a huge audience. I'm like, listen, first off, that does not happen overnight. That gets built over time. You also have to remember, even if you have 10 people watching your show, imagine yourself in a room and now there's 10 audience members watching you perform. That's 10 people you never would have imagined would support you. When you see that number that looks like 100, yeah, compared to other people, that seems small, but imagine 100 people in a room watching you perform. I feel like we're losing our perspective here on how big that is. Time, you know, in a few decades ago, 10, 20 people is a nice packed room. 100 people is a hit. Anything beyond that, you're blockbuster. So don't worry about that aspect. Just go out there and do it, and I promise you the audience will come.
Excellent. And to round this all out, you know, probably for KP, you know, Mr. Social Media, where can people find out more about, you know, you guys in Camp Rend?
Camp Rend, we're at Death Roll Show on all the social medias. Our YouTube page is also Death Roll Show. I have to be very specific when I say you have to do Death Roll and then Show all together, because we came to realize Death Roll is also what crocodiles do to help kill their victims. And then if you go into YouTube, you can type it in one word, or even if you type it spaced out, you'll see us pop up as like either the first or second or third thing that comes up on there. We're hoping that as our presence grows, that it becomes a lot easier to find us on YouTube. But also all of the social medias have links.
We're going to take Death Roll back from the Gators. We're going to make it about the show.
Hey man, I live in Florida. I'm sure they'll have something to say about that.
Yeah, I know.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time today to chat with TechRaptor. I'm really looking forward to checking out the show when the first episode drops on the 10th of October.
Yeah.